America started out as a authoritarian state. If you take Plymouth Plantation and William Bradford as our foundation story, Mayflower landed in Plymouth in 1620. The first slaves came to America in 1619. They were ahead of the Pilgrims. Shortly after they landed, Bradford came up with the Mayflower Compact. Of the 102 passengers on the Mayflower, only 41 signed on, period. The others decided to be independent. That didn't make Bradford very happy. He tried to assert control from the very outset. Shortly after, a few years, along came a person that I want to talk about. His name is Thomas Morton. Thomas Morton was the first real dissident in America. He also wrote the first book that was ever banned in America. So here we go, right at the outset, we're banning books. Long and illustrious history of banning books. Not only banned his books, but they tried to exile him. They tried to get rid of him. And they did get rid of him for a while, but he kept coming back. Why did they want to get rid of him? Because Thomas Morton broke from the group and set up his own colony called Marymount. It was a colony that was founded on principles of joy and happiness and everybody following their own bent. What would later be known as individualism in this country. He's often referred to in history as somebody who set up a counter camp of paganism. And yes, he had some rather frivolous enterprises going on that may have even been pagan, although they didn't follow any really pagan ritual in any kind of methodical manner, period. He set up his maypole, which Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote a wonderful story about, the maypole of Marymount. And they use that as a means of having fun. That's what they're about. They're trying to just live their lives. Well, Bradford didn't like that. And so for almost the entire time Thomas Morton had his little colony, Bradford and friends were harassing them. And they were harassing them at gunpoint. They'd burn down the houses, and Morton and his friends would rebuild. The thing that Bradford really disliked was the fact that Thomas Morton was a friend of the Indians. Yes, he sided with the Indians. At the outset, Bradford was working with two native tribes in their first winter and subsequent spring. The first winter was hellish. It's called many things, but basically, many people died that first winter. They died of starvation and they died of disease. Starvation is kind of strange given the fact that the ocean was teeming with cod in Plymouth, but these guys didn't know how to fish. In fact, they didn't have a skill set whatsoever to set up their plantation. They couldn't fish, they couldn't hunt, they didn't know how to plant, they didn't know what crops to plant. It was the Native Americans, the Indians, who helped them out. And these are the Indians that are celebrated in the first Thanksgiving. And then shortly thereafter, Bradford had problems with the Indians as well. And this is where Thomas Morton comes in again, because he befriended the Indians. And while Bradford and company were harassing and often killing the Indians, not Bradford personally, he sent other people to do that. Thomas Morton befriended them. He even gave them guns. He armed them. He armed them to defend themselves against William Bradford and Company. Well, Bradford and Company didn't like that either. So along comes a guy named Miles Standish, and Miles Standish decides to take it upon himself to go after them. And he does, in a big way. He cuts down the Maypole, and he subsequently harasses and causes an incursion against the Native Americans. This was because Thomas Morton and friends were not playing the game. They're not going along with Bradford's Mayflower Compact. They wanted nothing to do with it. They wanted their own lives. They wanted to live independently. And this was not considered worthwhile or necessary or meaningful. Or in other words, they weren't following and kowtowing to William Bradford and his so-called laws. So they were harassed. And again, their camps were burned out. But with the rifles and ammunition, the natives fought back. And Bradford and friends didn't like that either. So he swept in and basically removed them and got rid of Thomas Morton, exiled him. He came back, was exiled again. This is our foundation story. But you don't get this story. You get the story of William Bradford and the Plymouth Colony and how wonderful they were with the Native Americans and how the Native Americans helped them and how they had their first Thanksgiving and all was hunky-dory with the world. And that's not the story. That's only part of the story. The other part of the story is Thomas Morton and friends, a dissident, somebody who goes against the grain, somebody who goes against authoritarianism. This is our history. This is our foundation story. You have authoritarian government, and then you got dissidents that are going up against the authoritarian government. And then you got the authoritarian government levying their heavy hand against them and eliminating them, eliminating the dissidents. And what are they called in history? Oh, they're called pagans, and they practice pagan rituals and pagan rites and all that sort of nonsense. No, they were people who were just wanting to live and celebrating their lives. Yes, Thomas Morton made beer, and they drank, and they frolicked, and they had a grand old time, much like you would do at a fraternity party. These guys had fun. Well, the Puritans in Bradford didn't like that. They didn't like them having fun. And so they did everything in their power to eliminate them. And he eventually drove Thomas Morton to the point where Thomas Morton died. I think this ought to be our foundation story. Fast forward to today. I'm not too sure there's a lot of difference anymore. As I said in my previous video, we are now in an authoritarian government. And look what the authoritarian government is doing to the dissidents. Look at the books that are banned. Go to any library in America, if they're still open, and check out the banned books. And you'll see the books that challenge the government, the books that critique the government are banned or vilified. Ray Bradbury, seriously, banned. Kurt Vonnegut, World War II veteran and prisoner of war, banned. George Orwell, a critique of authoritarian governments. But you know what? He wasn't critiquing democracy. He was critiquing communism. He's still banned. Because that's what we do. We ban books, black authors, Asian authors, Hispanic authors banned because they don't want to hear what life is like from the bottom up. They don't want to hear what life is like for the people who struggle to get a foothold in this country and try to make it. And so they banned their books. Just like Thomas Morton. First one, banned. Carry on. Cheers.